Hello everyone, today we dive deep in the patch 11.11. All the slides you're going to see are part of the patch rundown that is on Mordekaiser's channel, so you can go and feel free to watch this. But this video specifically is meant to be just a more concise and my opinions on the changes that are going to happen this Wednesday. Obviously, skirmishers are a big center of attention. They're gonna get nerfed, and I'll share my thoughts on that just when we get to those slides, but I really wanted to get out first. Skirmishers will be nerfed. Let's dive into the shop rates, because I think this is really important. This is important because rolling on 7 right now is more often than not the proper way to play, especially at high elo. Almost all of the lobby will roll on 7, which means that if you grade and try to roll on 8, usually you're gonna lose a shit ton of HP. And right now, this is a buff to level 7, yes, but they're trying to bring the power of like 4 costs down and upgrade the power of 3 costs. So I guess we'll see how it turns out in practice. But I think the biggest problem here is like this 15%. I think nailing that, bringing that down to 10 would have been probably better to like fix the meta of everyone rolling on 7. But it's not the only thing that actually like makes people roll on 7, right? It's not only the odds, it's because right now the 4 costs are just the better carries. You're not rewarded for playing a 3 cost, you're not rewarded for going for a 5 cost, except when you can actually like pivot correctly into Kale, which is really not that often. This is not going to change a whole lot per se, but we'll see how it pans out. Another thing really important is the shadow items, where you're going to see a lot more of shadow items basically. So you have to learn them, you have to be aware of them. Obviously there's a lot of strong shadow items. Make sure that you use them to their full potential. Now the first slide is actually quite juicy. I want to bring your attention to skirmishers. Basically, this is a huge nerf at early game because max HP on a like 1 cost unit is really bad compared to like a 300 flat. So this is a big nerf to the early game of skirmishers, which is where they really shine. I think a lot of people put the blame on Jax, but the problem is not Jax, it's the actual insanity of the board on level 6. As soon as you have like 6 skirmishers, even if you don't have Jax, you're almost impossible to beat, especially since Trundle and Pantheon also have the Dragon Slayer trait. The whole comp is just really strong throughout like all of the game, and it's why it's so obnoxious to play against. I don't think the trait itself is kind of the problem, but I can see why they're trying to switch. At least now you're more rewarded to slam HP items like Warmugs and stuff like that. Obviously it's not the only skirmisher changes that happens in this patch, but this is pretty significant. It's a huge early game nerf. Everything else is okay. I mean, this is a slight nerf to Forgotten 9, which is well deserved. Forgotten 9 is absolutely monstrous. Then you get a buff to Abomination 4 specifically. I think that's okay, because usually even go with an A-bomb spat, it doesn't feel good to go A-bomb 4. You're usually gonna keep the spat and maybe just remove one of the weaker A-bomb units. So I think this is well deserved. A-bomb needs some love, especially at the later stage of the games, and every time now Sion's gonna cast earlier, so that's cool. No more like huge animation for him to actually like start hitting, which is just not fun. And slight Knight nerf, which is indirectly a slight Kale nerf, and Kale itself is getting nerfed, so I'm pretty sure it's not going to be as strong as it is right now, even though I don't think it was broken whatsoever. Now here you get a Udyr nerf. Deserved Udyr right now, especially since you can like 2-star him quite early, slam Jax items on him, and he's just unstoppable. Like just Udyr with like a Ginsu is literally like your mid-game god. Big Vlad buff also. Maybe now it's worth it to have like the Renewer star, the Lissandra Vlad start, with Vlad kind of acting as a tank, especially with the Sedge buff. Maybe you go Vladimir Lissandra into Sejuani, which gives you the Nightbringer, and you have the Renewer trait. I'm not sure it's gonna push him like to the top, but 50 damage is like no joke, especially since he's gonna heal off of that, right? And the 70 damage on 2 stars is actually like quite huge. That's a lot. That's a big chunk. Now going quickly over the 2 cost champs, basically LeBlanc 3 nerf. LeBlanc 1 buff, which is okay. I think LeBlanc 1 is not a problem. LeBlanc 3 is the problem. Getting her stun duration reduced, I think, is fine. It's just obnoxious to play against, and I'm sorry if you're a LeBlanc player, but it's not very fun to be on the receiving end, that's for sure. And I think the team agrees, that's why they nerfed it. I think LeBlanc is still playable in this income for sure. Now Sejuani, like I said, this is quite the buff, honestly. Right now Sej just doesn't do anything. It's not a good unit. She's basically like a trade bot, if even that, because Nightbringer and Cavalier are usually easy to fill up. So I really think it was warranted that Sejuani needed a bit of love. Same for Soraka. Now she is going to cast just a bit earlier, and the whole point of Soraka is casting before your opponent. So definitely that's going to help. And now the big one though is Trundle. Trundle is absolutely insane. This unit is just completely busted. I think nerfing his AP ratio is fine, especially because he has Dragon Slayer. So remember, Dragon Slayer gives AP. So this will definitely reduce his strength. Same thing with the spell duration, which it isn't quite nerfing, but it is, because he's not gonna cast like twice or 3 times now. He's probably only gonna cast 1, but he's gonna keep the stat for longer, so I guess you get that in return. But this is just a flat around nerf, which was deserved. Right now Trundle is just absolutely obscene. Trundle and Pantheon are the real problems with skirmishers, in my opinion. Also, there's like a slight nerf to Varus 3. I don't know, I literally haven't seen Varus 3s in my lobbies like at all. So I'm just gonna glance over that. Now in this slide, the most important thing is Morgana can now actually like maybe frontline. Morgana was super prominent at the start of this expansion. Right now she's almost nowhere to be seen. 50 HP and 20 mana basically ensures that she's at least gonna cast now. So this is a great buff. I think Morgana is an interesting unit, so I'm glad they're buffing her. But the biggest thing here is the Pantheon nerf. I think that's too far, in my opinion. I don't like that you don't get rewarded for going 2 or 3 stars, but I can definitely understand why they want to nerf the Earling of Pantheon. Right now it's just way too tanky. Slap a Redemption or a Warmog on him and he's basically unkillable. So this is deserved, because once again this kills off AP, and he has Dragon Slayer. Hitting Dragon Slayer 2 is just super easy. So definitely Pantheon is someone we needed to hit on, so I'm glad to see that. And a slight Nidalee buff. Right now Nidalee is just a skirmisher trade buff. She does nothing that's really warranted right now. As soon as you can swap her for VO, you do. Hopefully this brings her more in line with the other units. There's also the Riven 3-star buff, which I think is interesting. I really wish we had more versatility. Right now you only go for 4 cost carries. I think that's quite uninteresting. I would like to see some reroll comps. I want to see 3 cost carries, I want to see 4 cost carries, and I want to see legendary carries. I think that's where TFT shines the most, and when there's a variety of strategy, not everyone rolling like on 7 and just hitting the 4 cost carries. I think that removes a lot of like depth. So I'm interested to see how it's going to go. I don't think it's going to be enough to push her, but hopefully with the 4 cost nerf this might be enough. Speaking of which, if Moonboy is getting buffed, which I think is deserved right now, you just don't see him at all. So I like this. He needed it for sure. Draven's getting nerfed. Who's surprised? Absolutely no one. So that was also easy to be seen. Karma's getting buffed. It's a bit early to know if like Moonboy and Karma will take over, but those 2 carries definitely showed us earlier in the patch how strong they can be. So we'll definitely see compared to Draven. I think this brings all the 4 cost carries a bit closer in line. There's also a Daisy buff, which is a bug fix, but it's going to be basically a buff. Now, Ivern 2 is going to be a bit stronger. I'm not sure it's going to be enough to bring him back, but we'll see. Now, here is something I kind of dislike. Right now, the TFT team balances too many things at once, in my opinion. They're nerfing the Skirmisher traits, they're nerfing Trundle, they're nerfing Pantheon, and they're nerfing Jax. I think that's a lot of nerfs on the comp, when I don't think Jax was the problem. Jax is fine. It's a 4 cost carry. He's strong, yes, but the really like insane thing about skirmishers is Trundle Panth being double Dragon Slayer skirmishers and just being all around great units, and the fact that you can transition super easily in like a good early game, a good mid game, and a good late game. There's not a whole lot of comps right now that are just strong throughout the whole game. So this is something I quite disagree with. The comp is already getting nerfed, and it's like, yes, it's literally everywhere, but I don't think Jax right now is just like absolutely broken good like everyone seems to think. This is a bit too heavy for my taste. It's like last patch they buffed a lot of the skirmishers, they buff the Dragon Slayer traits. Like when you touch everything and then the traits, I don't know, I think it's too much to actually foresee what's going to happen, and it gave us this meta which is far from the best one we've had. So I kind of wish they didn't nerf Jax and keep the Pantheon in the Trundle nerf and also the trait nerf. I think that was enough. Right now I think Skirmisher is just going to be completely dead. Mordekaiser getting a small nerf also. This gives a bit more time to kill him before he gets that initial cast. I think that's fine, honestly. Mordekaiser has been strong the whole expansion, so definitely warranted. To keep in line Vel'Koz with the other 4 costs, they're gonna slightly nerf him, which I think is really smart, because right now I don't think Vel'Koz is too strong, but he's definitely one of the late game carries that works. And if you're gonna nerf Skirmishers and you're gonna nerf Draven, you kind of have to touch Vel'Koz, otherwise he would have been the absolutely dominant comp for sure. So I think this is smart for them to preemptively nerf him, make sure all the 4 costs are closer in line. Now this is very interesting because I really think, except for the Garen and Darius changes, which I like, I really don't think the last 2 changes fit well. Right now, Heimer just isn't played because he's basically never allowed to cast. He doesn't have time. With the nerf that they did last patch, he basically never casts. And even when he does, he doesn't hurt that much. Not as much as they wanted it to be. So right now, if you don't have like Shojin Ginsu, it's going to be really hard to work with Armordinger. With this buff, at least when the cast is going to go off, it's going to melt the whole team, but it's going to be really difficult to make work. I kind of like that they want to go for this unique carry that just doesn't cast often, but when he does, it literally melts your board. I think that's kind of interesting, but I don't think it's going to be enough to actually like fix the problem Heimerdinger has, unless the whole meta kind of slows down and allows him to go for these casts. Also, the Kyle nerf I think is unwarranted. They said in their data Kyle is overperforming, so we'll see. I think nerfing the knights and nerfing everything else, I mean basically she's just like mega squishy right now, so if you have a Viego or Diana, it's gonna absolutely like dumpster on Kale. We'll see if she can still be meta after that. I think she's just too squishy right now. She's gonna get deleted by Sins. I don't know. This is I don't know if that was warranted. Probably I would have preferred them going from 700 to 600. I don't like big nerfs and big buffs at the same time. Just go slowly and more regularly, I think is safer. Now for the 2 God Kings, basically they're both going to cast a bit faster, but the cast himself is going to be reduced. 70% of like armor shreds and 70% of MR shred is definitely way too much. I agree with that nerf. I think it makes for these 2 God Kings, basically the face of this expansion, kind of boring, because you play Garen or Darius simply to actually like be shred bots. They don't do a whole lot. You simply want Garen to shred when you're into Vel'Koz or Karma, and you want Darius to shred when you're with Draven or Jax sometimes. It's not interesting. It's not an interesting mechanic, and they're not interesting as carries, which is what they want them to be. So this is a good direction. Then a slight buff to the Bear God, which is Volibear, my favorite champion. Unfortunately, I don't think this is enough to make him relevant. He's gonna cast a bit sooner, but like with Ivern being kind of weak, the whole trifecta of Ivern, Volibear, Heimer just has been lacking a lot lately. With the small buff to Daisy, the small buff to Heimer, and the small buff to Volibear, maybe this triple little nudges will be enough to make them come back. I really hope. Volibear is super interesting, so I hope this is going to be enough at least to have him cast now. There are some item changes also. The 2 Archangel staffs are just better than they were. I don't think they were garbage, but usually the problem with this item is that it uses both a tear and a rod, which are like, I would consider them prime components, because with the tear you can do redemption, you can do blue buff, and you can do Shojin already. So the Archangel needs to be really good for you to use a tear on it. Same thing goes for the rod, because usually you're going to put the rod either in a Morello, in a Ginsu, in a Jewel Gauntlet. So you can see kind of the problem with this item. It needs to be absolutely busted to take like 2 premium. Then we have a Risk Thirster buff, which I think is really interesting. I'm glad they still kept the identity, and they're just trying to buff it towards being good, because right now it just isn't. BT is just much better, but at least you get a bigger payoff right now, because what you're paying is not only the 30% HP at the start, but you're also losing the BT shield, which is the biggest problem. BT usually is kind of a defensive item more than an offensive one, so making Risk Thirster having a bigger payoff is really interesting, and hopefully it's going to be enough to not make it like other garbage. Deathblade and Shadow Deathblade are getting buffed. That combined with Moonboy buff, I think is going to probably bring him back into the meta, especially since Sejuani also got buffed. There's a bunch of like early game Nightbringer that got buffed. So definitely keep an eye out on that. Deathblade wasn't super bad, it's just a win more item, and it also uses double BF swords, and BF swords can already do like so many great items that justifying using 2 for Deathblade is not always doable. At least now you're gonna get a bigger payoff. Shadow Gunblade is now a bit smarter, which is quite a decent buff honestly, especially in like this kind of Brand Bulens build that has been going over, which is basically Brand with Shadow Gunblade in blue, and he'll be able to now direct heal, and I think it is super interesting to see a comp this way, and this buff is definitely gonna help it. I think this is a smart change, and I'm interested to see Shadow Gunblade move forward. Since Darius and Garen have been nerfed in terms of armor and MR shred, they're buffing Last Whisper, so you can still get that huge amount of shred. I think that's interesting because Shadow Last Whisper is just not a good item right now. Nobody's using it, so it's definitely needed. I'm happy that they're not lowering down the negative effects on shadow items, but they're buffing the bonus. I think this is what makes the shadow items interesting, is the reward versus cost, and right now I think increasing the reward is the correct way to balance shadow items that are not particularly strong. Static Shiv and Shadow Static getting nerfed. I think this is warranted. Static is really strong right now, and not only for like the damage, but especially for the armor shred. So just in line with everything else, basically that means that a lot of the teams are going to get tankier. To counteract that a little bit, and with the Pantheon nerfs, Redemption is probably going to see a bit less play, because right now slamming a Redemption on Trundle or Pantheon is super strong in skirmishers. This is nerfing it a bit. I think Redemption kind of deserved it. The components are really useful anyways, because it made the Trundle or the Pantheon cast their defensive ults like kind of faster. It has a belt on it. So I think this is a smart nerf. But the biggest change in items is actually the Shadow Trap Claw. Basically right now it's going to give a shield to your carry, the 2 units right beside, but it's not going to stun when the shield gets popped. So the bonus is basically you can add 2 allies, but the negative aspect is you don't get the stun. In a lot of cases, the stun is not why you want Trap Claw. If you want Trap Claw against like Vel'Koz, it's because you want the stun. But if you're against a Diana or Viego, you really only want the shield. This is the most important thing. You just don't want to get CC'd, and this is an interesting way to do. Honestly, I really like that change, and we'll see how it pans out, but I really like this. That was the last change. Tell me what you're expecting to be strong in 11.11. Right now, I think Moonboy is going to come back. I think Karma is going to be decent, but we'll see. I don't think a Riven buff will be enough to make her viable. Skirmishers probably down the gutter right now. I can't wait for this patch. Honestly, right now, it's not the most fun meta. So if you enjoy TFT content, make sure to subscribe for more.